Isabella Cruz and Omar al-Mansouri never imagined that a secret love built in silence would end under the cold lights of an empty parking garage, where obsession, blackmail, and betrayal collided into a single fatal moment that changed everything in one night. Dr. Isabella Cruz had spent nearly a decade building a life that many people admired. Originally from the Philippines, she moved to Abu Dhabi with dreams of advancing her medical career and supporting her family back home. Through years of hard work, long shifts, and constant dedication, she became one of the most respected physicians at a private medical center. Her colleagues appreciated her professionalism, while patients trusted her calm and caring nature. To everyone around her, Isabella appeared focused entirely on her career. Few people knew how lonely her life sometimes felt behind the image of success. Most of her days followed a predictable routine. She arrived at work early, spent hours seeing patients, completed work late into the evening, and returned to her apartment exhausted. The demanding schedule left little room for friendships or relationships. Although she rarely complained, there were moments when the quietness of her personal life felt overwhelming. Across the city, Omar al-Mansouri lived a very different life. As a senior executive at a major oil company, he enjoyed wealth, influence, and social status. He attended business events, managed large projects, and regularly appeared alongside important figures in the industry. He was married and known as a devoted family man. Friends and colleagues viewed him as someone who had achieved everything a person could want. Their paths crossed during a corporate health initiative organized between Omar's company and the medical center where Isabella worked. At first, their interactions were entirely professional. Meetings focused on employee wellness programs, health screenings, and workplace safety. Neither gave the relationship much to you in the beginning. Over time, however, the meetings became more frequent. They discovered shared interests and similar experiences of pressure, responsibility, and expectation. What began as professional respect slowly developed into a personal connection. They found themselves looking forward to conversations that had little to do with work. As months passed, the relationship deepened. Both understood the risks involved. Omar's marriage and public reputation made the situation dangerous. Isabella knew that becoming involved with a married man could damage everything she had worked to achieve. Despite those concerns, neither ended the relationship. Secrecy soon became part of their lives. Meetings were carefully arranged away from familiar places. Messages were deleted. Schedules were adjusted to avoid attention. For nearly 2 years, their secret remained hidden from friends, family, and colleagues. They believed they had planned everything perfectly. What neither realized was, a single unnoticed photograph had already captured one of their private meetings, and someone would eventually use that image to change both of their lives forever. For nearly 2 years, Isabella and Omar believed their secret remained safely hidden. Every precaution seemed to be working. Their meetings stayed discreet, their communications were carefully managed, and no rumors appeared among colleagues or friends. The confidence they had built around their secrecy made the first anonymous message even more unsettling. It arrived late one evening through an unfamiliar email account. At first glance, it appeared harmless, but as Isabella read the contents, a feeling of dread settled over her. The sender mentioned details that only a handful of people could possibly know. Specific dates, locations, and private encounters were described with alarming accuracy. The message ended without any explanation of how the information had been obtained. Isabella tried convincing herself it was some kind of coincidence. Perhaps someone had guessed. Perhaps it was a prank. She deleted the email and attempted to move on. Yet a few days later, another message arrived. This one contained even more information. The sender clearly knew about the relationship and had been watching for a considerable amount of time. The messages continued over the following weeks. Each one became more threatening than the last. Eventually, the sender revealed the true purpose behind the contact. Money was demanded in exchange for silence. The anonymous individual claimed to possess evidence capable of exposing everything. Photographs, schedules, and records of meetings were supposedly stored and ready to be released if payment was not made. Fear quickly replaced doubt. Isabella understood how devastating public exposure could be. Years of professional achievement could disappear overnight. Her reputation, career, and family relationships could all suffer permanent damage. Desperate to protect herself, she secretly transferred money using instructions provided by the blackmailer. For a brief period, she believed the problem had been solved. Then another demand arrived. The amount requested was larger than before. Realizing she could not continue handling the situation alone, Isabella informed Omar about the threats. To her surprise, he revealed that he had also begun receiving anonymous messages. The blackmailer was targeting both of them separately. Unlike Isabella, Omar refused to make any payments. He believed giving money would only encourage further demands. His confidence frustrated Isabella, who feared the consequences of resistance. The disagreement created tension that slowly spread through their relationship. As the pressure increased, suspicion began to grow. Each wondered how the blackmailer had obtained such detailed information. Questions emerged that neither could answer. Had someone close to them discovered the affair? Was one of them being followed? Then, a new message arrived containing photographs taken from different locations over several months. The images revealed a disturbing truth. Someone had been secretly tracking their movements for far longer than either of them had imagined. The photographs changed everything. Until that moment, Isabella and Omar had viewed the blackmailer as someone who had simply uncovered a secret relationship. The images revealed something far more disturbing. Many of the photographs had been taken from a distance using powerful cameras. Some showed them entering buildings. Others captured them leaving private meetings months apart. The collection demonstrated patience, planning, and an obsession that neither could understand. As the days passed, the messages became increasingly urgent. The blackmailer insisted that the situation could still be resolved, but only if specific instructions were followed. Every message carried an unmistakable warning. Failure to cooperate would result in the immediate arrest of evidence. The pressure weighed heavily on Isabella. She found it difficult to focus at work and struggled to sleep. The fear of exposure followed her everywhere. Then, one evening, a new message arrived. Unlike the previous demands, this one promised an end to the nightmare. The sender claimed that all evidence would be handed over during a final meeting. Once the exchange was completed, there would be no further contact. The location was an underground parking garage beneath a commercial building on the edge of the city. The area was known for being quiet at night, with very little activity after business hours. The instructions were clear. Isabella was to arrive alone shortly before midnight. For hours she debated whether to go. Every instinct warned her that the situation felt dangerous, yet the possibility of ending the blackmail was impossible to ignore. She convinced herself that retrieving the evidence was the only way to regain control of her life. Shortly before midnight, security cameras recorded her vehicle entering the parking structure. The garage appeared almost empty. Long rows of parked cars sat beneath dim lights that left large sections of the concrete floor covered in shadow. After parking, Isabella stepped out and walked toward the designated meeting area. Unknown to her, another message had been sent that same evening. Omar received separate instructions directing him to the exact location. The blackmailer claimed Isabella was planning to betray him and that he needed to come alone if he wanted to protect himself. Confused and alarmed, he drove to the parking garage without informing anyone. Security footage later showed Omar entering the structure approximately 15 minutes after Isabella arrived. What happened next remained unclear. Several cameras captured partial movements between vehicles, but important sections of the garage were outside their range. Investigators would later identify signs of a struggle. Shadows move quickly across the footage before disappearing from view. At one point, a figure appeared to run between parked cars. Minutes later, a dark-colored vehicle raced out of the garage exit. The following morning, a maintenance worker made a horrifying discovery. Near Isabella's vehicle, her body was found lying motionless on the concrete floor, turning a secret affair and a blackmail scheme into a murder investigation that would soon shock the entire city. The discovery of Isabella's body immediately turned the case into a high-priority investigation. The parking garage quickly became the center of forensic work, with officers sealing every entrance and collecting evidence from the concrete floors, stairwells, and surrounding exits. Early assumptions pointed toward a crime of passion or a confrontation linked to the secret relationship. Because Omar was the last known person connected to Isabella, his name surfaced almost instantly in the investigation. Detectives began by reconstructing the timeline of that night. Surveillance footage from nearby buildings was collected and analyzed frame by frame. It confirmed that both Isabella and Omar had entered the parking structure within a short time of each other. However, the footage was incomplete, with several blind spots that made it impossible to see the exact moment of the incident. This lack of clarity created early confusion and allowed multiple theories to form. Financial records and phone data were reviewed next. Investigators searched for any signs of recent conflict, messages, or unusual activity between Isabella and Omar. What they found did not fully support the idea of a sudden argument between the two. There were no direct communications indicating hostility before the meeting. Instead, the data pointed toward external interference, especially through the pattern of anonymous messages both had been receiving. The investigation shifted when forensic analysts examined the digital traces behind the Blackham AIL messages. The sender had taken extreme measures to hide their identity, using multiple accounts and routing systems. At first, it seemed impossible to trace. However, a small financial transaction connected to one of the payment instructions created a breakthrough. That transaction led detectives to a consulting firm that specialized in private surveillance and corporate intelligence. One name repeatedly appeared in the internal records connected to previous freelance assignments: Daniel Reyes. He was known for conducting discreet background investigations and security monitoring for high-value clients. When detectives examined Daniel's professional history, they found a connection that had been overlooked. Years earlier, he had been hired to observe corporate compliance at events involving Omar's company. During that assignment, he had access to surveillance systems and personnel movements. It was during this period that the original photograph of Isabella and Omar had been captured. Instead of discarding the material after the assignment ended, Daniel had retained copies. Further checks revealed that he had continued monitoring certain digital footprints connected to both individuals long after his official work ended. His interest had shifted from professional observation to personal fixation. A search warrant executed at his storage unit uncovered a disturbing collection of printed photographs, logs of movements, and detailed notes tracking both Isabella and Omar over an extended period. Although this evidence strongly suggested involvement in the blackmail scheme, investigators still needed to prove direct participation in the murder itself. The final link between surveillance and violence remained missing, leaving the case open and unstable as pressure mounted to identify the person responsible before more questions went unanswered. The search of Daniel Rey's storage unit marked a turning point in the investigation. What once appeared to be a complex, unexplained murder case now had a central figure connected to surveillance, blackmail, and long-term tracking. However, proving intent and linking him directly to the killing still required stronger evidence. Detectives intensified their efforts, focusing on his digital devices, communication patterns, and movements in the days leading up to the incident. A breakthrough came when forensic experts recovered deleted files from a laptop seized during the investigation. The data revealed structured records of Isabella and Omar's daily routines. There were detailed schedules, location logs, and observations that had been updated over months. The level of precision suggested that Daniel had maintained constant monitoring rather than occasional observation. Alongside these records were drafts of threatening messages, carefully written but never sent through official channels, indicating premeditated control over the blackmail operation. More importantly, timestamps placed Daniel near the area of the parking garage on the night of the murder. While not conclusive on their own, the digital traces aligned with the time window of the attack. Additional analysis of mobile network data showed a device registered to him briefly connecting to a tower close to the location before going offline shortly after midnight. Investigators also uncovered financial movements that painted a clearer picture of motive. Despite several attempts at extorting money, the amounts collected were inconsistent and lower than expected. This suggested that the blackmail scheme had become less about profit and more about control. Daniel appeared increasingly fixated on managing the lives of his victims rather than simply exploiting them. As the evidence accumulated, authorities prepared to apprehend him. However, Daniel was no longer at his registered address. Surveillance teams discovered that he had attempted to leave the country using altered identification documents. His plan unraveled when migration officers flagged inconsistencies in his travel records, allowing law enforcement to intercept him before departure. During questioning, investigators pieced together the final sequence of events. Evidence suggested that Daniel had arranged the final meeting under the belief that he could control both Isabella and Omar at once. The confrontation inside the parking garage escalated beyond his expectations. Isabella's unexpected reaction disrupted his plan to quietly obtain leverage, leading to a struggle that ended in violence. Panic replaced control, and he fled the scene without securing anything of value. With his arrest, the full scope of the case came into focus. A hidden photograph, an obsessive pattern of surveillance, and escalating blackmail had slowly built toward a fatal encounter that none of the victims could have fully anticipated. Omar's life was permanently damaged by suspicion and public scrutiny. Isabella's family was left with unanswered emotional wounds. The investigation concluded that what began as secrecy and control ultimately collapsed into irreversible tragedy inside a silent parking garage, where years of hidden obsession finally reached its breaking point.